I've been shooting video and photos for the last 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've learned a lot. And today I'm going to share some of that information with you so you don't make the mistakes that I did. So in the last 20 years, I've had a lot of ups and downs, and all of those ups and downs have taught me a lesson of their own. Good lessons, bad lessons. Everything has been a learning curve. I don't consider anything as a failure, but I consider everything a process of learning. So what I want to do is go through some of the main things that I've learned over the last 20 years. Now, some of these you may already know, some of them may be new to you, some of them you may not have considered. Now, a lot of these things may seem just like general common sense, but believe it or not, most of the time people don't think of these things because we're too busy trying to chase clients, or we're trying to figure out what the new gear is that I want to purchase this month, next month, or in the next 6 months, whatever it is. A lot of these things we don't think about. So I'm going to go through them in no particular order, and hopefully these help you avoid mistakes and get things right from the beginning, especially if you're brand new to photography, videography, whatever. So let's start off with number one. Again, this is in no particular order, but number one for me, branding is everything. Okay. You are your brand. You as an individual, if you're starting out fresh, you are your brand. If you're not starting out fresh, if you've been around for a while, your brand is all the work that you've done, how you conduct yourself as a human being towards other people, towards clients. That is your brand. So you need to understand that you need to brand everything right here. If you do this step right, it will carry you further than any upgrade on camera or gear that you ever make. Which leads me on to number two, which is focus on your craft, not your gear. Okay, this is very important because we're too busy trying to figure out what's the new gear coming out that I want to purchase, and I want to get this lens, and I want to get that lighting equipment, or I want to get this camera and whatever. Stop doing that. Focus on your craft. Become the best at what you do. That is always going to pay more dividends than any camera upgrade. Okay, you becoming really good at using Photoshop, or you becoming really good at using Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, whatever software you use, understanding the process and learning new techniques, new skill sets is always going to work out better for you. Why? Well, because now you are armed with a skill set that is perhaps outperforming other people, doing better than others, or you now have tools that are available which are much more intuitive, that save you time, get stuff done quicker, and at the end of the day, creating better work than other people is what counts. That's what's going to bring you closer to new clients. They're not going to say, that was shot on a Sony FX3 or an FX6 or an Alexa or a Sony Venice camera. All these things are not really too much of a concern unless you are technical, unless the people who are looking at your work are technical individuals. Then you get deeper into that. Like for example, in the recent F1 movie that's come out, they had to reinvent the cameras to put onto the F1 cars so that they can film it, because you're not going to have massive rigs going onto the cameras, right? That scenario is a completely different thing. But if you're working with clients that are a smaller budget, they're not going to care what camera you have. Get your skill set right, because that's what's going to matter more than the camera that you're going to shoot with. I'm not saying the camera is not important at all. Yes, it is, but your skill set is what matters more. Moving on to number three, choose your circle very carefully. Now, this isn't just anything to do with photography or video. This is a general rule of life, right? The people in your circle matter massively, especially the older you get, the less people are going to be in your circle. I always say to people, your circle needs to be small in numbers, but very high in value. That's what actually matters more than, hey, I've got 50,000 followers. No one gives a shit about that unless it's to do with business, yes. But your circle, your immediate circle, needs to be small but high in value. Some of you may know, some of you may not know how draining it can be to have so many people want your attention all the time. But not only that, but they have bad intentions, or they are not really the people that you think they were. They may not want you to be successful. They may not want you to progress in life the way that you want to progress in life, and so on and so on and so on. That is also translated into business as well. It transfers into business. So if you have someone that you're working with who doesn't have the best intentions, who you can feel the energy coming off and say, you know what, this person's not right for me to work with, you got to find a way to get out of that ASAP. I've had personal experiences many times over working with certain people. Obviously, I'm not going to mention names because that would be unethical, but you get the point, right? So choosing the right people to work with is super important, full stop. That moves me on to number four, which is know your worth. Knowing your worth with who you work with is one thing, but knowing your worth when you translate that to clients that you work with is another. Why is that? Because you don't want to be the guy or the girl who everybody comes to when they want stuff done for cheap. You don't want to be known as that guy. Now, I've done this in the early years, since 2012 to like 14, 15. So for a good 3-4 years, I went through a phase where I did things for cheap, for people just to sort of get my foot in the door or to build a portfolio with individuals. And that's fine to do that early on. Yes, sometimes you need to do free work to get your foot in the door, especially if you're starting out. Cool. You can do that, but don't make it a habit where you do things for free or you start undercutting other people just because you want the job. You cannot be looking at work that way, otherwise your business ain't gonna last very long. Yes, you need to treat it as a business, which I'm gonna get onto later on. So know your worth, know what your skill set is worth, which again goes back to what I said. Learn the skills because learning the skill pays you more. Moving on to point number 5, collect a deposit. Sounds pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people work with clients and they don't collect a deposit. Why is that important? Well, that's when you know they're serious. If they paid you a deposit, you know that they are serious. Sometimes I work with clients who don't even just question it. They just drop you a deposit, you're ready to go. They can be one of the best clients to work with because then you know you're going to get paid, less questions asked. You got their work done, they received it, they're happy with it. Cool. Deposit is paid, full payment is done, on to the next client. And I'm not saying you get rid of clients like that, like you're firing shots from an M16, but you need to understand the process as well as being able to explain it to them what the process is so that everyone's on the same boat and everything is running smoothly as possible. Yes, of course, it's never going to be like that with every single client, but that's what we're trying to work for. So you work with higher quality clients rather than anyone and everyone, which is also very important. So you know that the clients that you work with are high in quality, which means that they will pay you a deposit without questions asked because they understand. And that goes back to knowing your worth and understanding how to communicate that worth to your clients. Number 6, stay organized from day one. This is important. You can end up with so much clutter and files everywhere on your system that later on it becomes a mission to try and get all of the data and files and folders all organized properly, and that becomes really time consuming. Time is a commodity that every single person on this planet has equally. Some people don't use it, obviously. Some people use it and become Elon Musk. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. So you want to save as much time as possible and you want to spend that time in the correct way on high value tasks that are most important to you, and so on and so on. And you leave the least ones, you try and distribute that. If you have a team, then you try and distribute the smaller tasks to your team so that they can carry it out. But if you're not at that stage where you only have yourself, most important tasks go at the top, which means if you can organize it right from the beginning, it saves you time later. I'm sure you guys understand what I mean by that. Number 7, learn the business side of things very early on. Now, I started doing the business side of things in 2017 when the company was set up, right? But I started doing photography and video way earlier than that. I didn't consider the business side of things way earlier because it was in my mind, right? So understanding the business side of things is super important because you got to treat your work as a business because that's what you're doing. If you are receiving income from carrying out work for clients, you are doing a business. It's as simple as that. So you need to treat it as a business, which means at some point you may need to register as a company, as a corporate entity, which then becomes two separate things from you and the company itself. You need to register a business bank account. You got to treat everything as a business, which then means you got to register for VAT, which then means you got to perhaps structure your company in a way where you can optimize for taxes, okay, which is super important. The more money you make, the more corporate tax you're going to have to pay. And then if you pay yourself as a salary or dividends, there are taxes involved in that as well. So all that is super important to know and understand as early on as possible, because then that paves your way to make things easier later on down the line. So again, I love how people think of, hey, I need to get this camera and I need to do this and I need to do that. Stop doing that. Think of your business as a business first, then think about everything else later. Okay, skill sets, organization, business skills are more important than picking up a camera and going to shoot for a client, right? I know it sounds weird because you want to be a photographer and you want to be a videographer, but you need to learn the skills because these are all important things that you need to know. That leads me on to number 8, which is build systems early. What does that mean? You need to build systems that are going to allow you to smooth out the process from start to finish from working with a client. And a lot of that comes down to your ability as an individual or a business to organize, automate, run things in a way where you don't require too much input to be put into those things. Create systems for creating content, create systems for backing up data, create systems for organizing your database, your CRM, who you've worked with, what the projects are coming up, your calendars, your emails, everything. You got to create systems where you know what you need to do and everything flows as smoothly as possible throughout the entire project from start to finish. That's going to take a bit of time, of course, if you're new to all of this and you begin to understand what the hard things are, what the easy things are, and you begin to adapt that to you as an individual and your life and your work, everything around you. If you're doing this as a full-time job, then that's one thing. If you're doing it as a part-time where you got, a 9 to 5 as well, and then you're doing this on the weekends, that's something different. But still, the same principles apply. The same systems need to be automated so you don't waste time. And we will have the same amount All right, let's move on to number 9. Now, number 9 is very simple. Learn to say no. You don't have to say yes to every single job that you get. There is a very satisfying and skillful feeling when you say no to someone. What do I mean by that? It means that you don't need to pick every single project that you get. You don't need to say yes to it. You can say no to projects that don't align with you. Now, if you say yes to every single project that you get or every single client that you work with, you don't really know what you're doing. And why am I saying that? Well, because you haven't niched down. Earlier on in your career, you can work with different clients, you can work with different genres, different industries. Sure, even I've done that. But it means you're saying yes to every single thing. And saying yes to every single thing means you don't know what you're worth. You don't know what your value is because you're just saying yes to everything. If you're doing a project that doesn't align with you as an individual, it doesn't align with your values, say no. And saying no is actually much harder than saying yes because you want to take in projects. But saying no to a project that you know you can do really well, but you don't want to do it because it's not really your kind of project, that's a much harder thing to do. Learning to say no is also a skill. And you got to be firm with it. You got to understand this is not something that I'm going to be comfortable with doing. I'm going to say no to this project. You got to develop that skill with time. And once you do, things will actually flow better for you because then you have higher quality projects coming your way instead of anything and everything that comes your way and you say yes to. So learn to say no. Number 10, adapt and evolve. This is super important because most people, when they start doing photography, they are stuck and they are stagnant in one or two different categories or genres or industries or skill sets, and they never really adapt. They never really evolve with the latest technologies or latest tools, right? Because they are designed to help you at the end of the day. Now, I said earlier, don't think about cameras all the time. Don't think I want to buy new lenses and new MacBooks and iPhones and all that. Yes, that still stands. What I mean by adapt and evolve, it means learn what's new, learn what's trending, understand what businesses need because businesses need new stuff. Because if they don't evolve, if they don't use the latest stuff, then their business dies. So you got to adapt and evolve with businesses and requirements and industry technologies and resources. Nowadays, AI is massive. If you're not using AI in your business, then something is not right. Okay, you're struggling to evolve. You're struggling to adapt to new technologies. So you as a business, you have to learn to adapt and evolve and understand the needs and requirements of the industries and the businesses and the clients that you're working with. Number 11, this is super important. Don't compare your journey with others. Everyone is in a different position. Everyone is in a different boat. Yes, we aspire to do well and create content like others. Of course, that's kind of like a goal or a target that you set yourself. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but don't compare your journey. Because you don't know what that person's been through. You don't know how long it's taken them to get to that stage and what sacrifices they've had to make. Let me tell you one thing, this isn't going to be an easy journey. If you're starting photography and videography from the beginning, this is not going to be an easy journey. You're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices, and that's the same with anything, okay? I know what I've had to sacrifice, and I'm not talking about baby goats here or something like that, okay? Not demonic shit. I'm talking about spending time with family, not going out. So many different things that you as an individual have to do on a daily basis that you have to give up in order to perfect your craft. And I'm not just talking about this. In general, I'm talking about there's one of those things that you have to do, as in sacrifice your time and freedom and stuff like that to really dive deep and become really good at what you do, okay? Otherwise, if you're not going to put 100% effort in, don't bother starting. So don't compare your journey. Instead, put in 110% effort, and one day you'll get to that stage. Could be in 6 months, could be in 12 months, could be in 3 years. Your journey depends on you. Your journey is never going to be the same as anyone else. So stop comparing and work your ass off. All right, moving on to the next one. Master communication. Sounds pretty obvious, but that's not an easy thing to do. Communicating is something that I found very difficult. Talking to the camera, as I'm doing right now, it's not an easy thing to do. Because you don't know who's looking at you on the other side of that lens. You're speaking to the world. But for you to be able to do that in a very open and structured way is extremely important, because at the end of the day, you are going to be communicating with clients. They need to understand that you as an individual and as a professional business owner can communicate, because communication is one of the most basic fundamental skills that you need to have as an individual to succeed in anything. So learn to communicate. Be clear, be confident, and be respectful, and you'll have clients. All right, the next point is network with intent. Network is important in my opinion. I think it's great to network with people, especially if they are in the same industry, but going to any and every network event is just pointless in my opinion, because it's time consuming and you're not always going to get what you want. So network with intent. Go to networking events where you have an intention to communicate with someone or to collaborate with someone, with a brand, with an individual or whoever. You got to have an intent. Whenever I go to networking events, I know what I'm going there for. Yes, I wander around to see who else is there and if there's anything else that could be beneficial to me or the business. Yes, I do that. But whenever I'm going to a networking event, I'm going there with intention. All right, moving on to the next point. Back up everything. I've been very good at doing this from the very beginning. I have all of my work since 2006. So the last 20 years, I've got all of my data. I'll probably do another video of how we back up our data as well. There are different levels and different layers of backing up your data. So it's always super important to have all of your data backed up in multiple locations as redundancy. So if anything is destroyed in one location, at least you have another one there, so you don't lose anything. All right, the next point, respect your craft. This is another important one that we sometimes overlook. What does that mean? You have to respect your craft. At the end of the day, you are representing your brand. And that was the first thing I mentioned. You respecting your craft means you show up on time. You make sure you give 100% of your effort when you are carrying out a job. You are being respectful to clients. You are communicating clearly with your clients and brands that you work with. You are being professional. You are keeping the promises that you make. That is you respecting your craft, because you are representing you as an individual, okay, as just an ordinary human being, but also you are representing your brand. And if you have a reputation of being a bit of an idiot, then you're not going to get clients. So respecting your craft becomes an important part of having a brand identity that everybody respects. If everybody respects your brand, people are going to work with you. Okay, moving on to the next point. Don't be afraid to charge more money. Sounds counterintuitive in some ways, because if you're starting out fresh, if you're starting out new, why would I charge you more? Well, don't do that when you're starting out fresh, of course. This is something that you need to consider over time. Don't be afraid to charge more. That comes from you respecting yourself and knowing what you're worth, is what I mentioned earlier. If you know that your work is great, why are you afraid to charge more money? It's a simple question. And if you don't have the answer to that question, then you don't know what your self-worth is. You don't know what your work is worth. So you need to know what you're worth, and you need to learn to say no. That all ties together. Consistency beats perfection. I'm learning that every day. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like to have everything in a particular way and organized and etc. etc. And that sometimes means that I can't consistently do things. Be consistent rather than trying to be perfect, because that's always going to be better. And I'm going to end on this last point. There's plenty more points that I can talk about, but I'm going to end on this one. And that is, teach what you know. I don't mean sell courses. Courses have this negative stigma around them. If you're a course seller, then you're considered a bit of a scammer, all this kind of stuff that you see online and on social media. I don't mean that. I mean, share your knowledge with others in your industry. Help those who are new, who are wanting to learn. Share your knowledge with them. But again, that comes down to your gut feeling and understanding, is this person being serious? Am I going to spend all of my time with this individual or this group of people and share my knowledge with them, and then they do absolutely nothing with it and they've just wasted my time? You got to be able to understand that as well. That's not an easy thing to do. Again, judging that character of the individual or the group becomes a challenge in itself. So that may take time. The point is, share what you know with people. Become a mentor. Indirectly become a mentor to people. That gives you a much higher image as a person in general anyway, rather than putting all that information behind a paywall. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do everything for free. There are certain things that you want to sell because you pay to know that knowledge, or you've spent years learning it and you shouldn't be giving away that information for free. Yes, I agree with that. There are certain pieces of information that should be treated that way, but not everything. Because a lot of people sell the most basic information and they put it behind a paywall, and you got to subscribe on a monthly fee to access that information. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. If it's general knowledge, or it might be basic stuff like the stuff that I've mentioned to you, it's not secret, right? It's just basic information, but people don't think about it. All right, so that's it. I'm going to leave it there for this video. I've shared quite a lot of points, and I hope you've learned something from each and every single one of them, or you are already doing those points in your business as well. If there's anything else that you guys want to share that has helped you in your business, let me know in the comments below. And as always, guys, like the video, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and make sure you share the video with others. All right, guys, have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next video.